game show, relatively speaking. Before that, BBC Wales Today with Sara Edwards.
Farmers call for urgent action as Europe refuses to lift the ban on British beef. The new Euro freight terminal for South Wales looks set to come to Wentlug near Cardiff. And does the right hand know what the left hand is doing as the Church in Wales accepts lottery money? Good evening. The farming unions in Wales have warned of impending disaster for the industry, with fears that Europe will force the slaughter of entire herds thought to be at risk from BSE. Today, European farm ministers refused to lift the worldwide ban on British beef exports, even though the government agreed to a selective cull of older cattle.
Talk of mass cattle slaughter has a grim familiarity for Wyn Griffiths, who farms at Llansanfraid in Powys. In the late 60s, every animal on his farm had to be killed and incinerated at the height of the foot and mouth epidemic. It's been a hard struggle to rebuild the business, and the trauma of the slaughter remains.
It was my first year farming, the first year I'd left school, and it was quite a shock. We weren't allowed to even leave the farm before the outbreak, and of course we weren't allowed to leave the farm afterwards. It was a case of great isolation.
Farmers have supported the cull of older cattle, a move backed by the government and agreed in Brussels. But European farm ministers want to go further. Farmers with cases of BSE may now have to slaughter entire herds.
Farmers are just professing the whole of this. From the beginning we have been used because we are the innocent party. We didn't know what was in the feed that was fed to the animals, and the governments were slow in reacting to the initial problem of BSE.
An emergency meeting at Bilthwells this morning of the NFU in Wales. The immediate problem, the refusal of Europe to lift the beef ban.
And we needed to take rational steps to be decided by rational people.
But Brussels is standing firm, only agreeing to review the ban in 6 weeks.
That is why we will continue to press government and also continue to press our fellow European farmers and the other European Union governments as to the nonsense of this now.
It's the most abject humiliation for the government. They went along with a package of proposals, last week having criticised the European community, then they literally had to go on bended knee, holding out the begging bowl, offering up the slaughter of millions of British cattle, and apparently now the Commission said, yes, go ahead and slaughter, but we're not going to pay what you asked us to pay, and we're not going to lift the ban on British beef.
The fear now is of wholesale job losses, more so if Europe insists on a wider cull before the ban is lifted. The government announced this afternoon a package to restore market confidence, but it's too late for Pantadelli Farm at Crymych in Pembrokeshire. The cattle there can't be sold, so the meat is being offered to the local school for free.
What are we going to do? It's costing me money, throwing good money after bad, day after day. So I'm sure for the sake of what I'll be giving the Crymych school, they can have as much as they like.
The school is now considering the offer, in itself a measure of the desperate straits Welsh farmers now find themselves in.
So Britain agrees to a selective slaughter, but Europe still won't lift the ban. Earlier I asked the Welsh Office Agriculture Minister Gwilym Jones what he thought of the deal.
It's very disappointing that the Europeans have decided to maintain that ban. We've been working very hard to try to get them to lift that, and that continues to be our objective.
Of course, the criticism is that the government therefore appears impotent in the face of European domination. That does seem to be the case, doesn't it?
Well, the Europeans have made that decision. It's something we have been challenging. We will continue to challenge. There isn't a scientific basis for that ban, and that's what we must keep going back to them on.
Well, where does that leave us in Wales? I mean, what is your message tonight to Welsh farmers, some of whom are facing economic ruin and some of whom are even resorting to giving their meat away?
I do appreciate that. In my dealings with farmers, the Farmers Union of Wales, and with other representatives, I've been most conscious of that. I find some encouragement. It's good to see that there is already a return of some confidence. We want to see more of that confidence returned, and that's very much the objective that the government will continue pursuing with all vigour.
But nevertheless, so far you appear politically to have been stymied. What are you going to do next?
Well, we now have secured some very worthwhile agreements from the Agriculture Council, intervention arrangements, commitment to assist with any culling programme that has to be instituted. They've invited the government to go back toward the end of this month with further proposals. We will certainly take forward all the various proposals, and very much one of the largest objectives must remain the lifting of this unjustified ban by Europe.
Mr. Jones, thank you very much. The new Euro freight terminal in South Wales is likely to be built at Wentlug, east of Cardiff. The Welsh office says it favours the site over an alternative one at Magod in Monmouthshire. The government says, however, that more detailed work will be needed before the scheme is finally approved, and that there's still no timetable for the construction of the terminal.
Today's decision follows months of pressure on the Welsh office to decide which of three rival consortia should have the right to build and operate the new terminal. Wentlug was the front runner, mainly because of its proximity to Cardiff. It's just a couple of miles from the city.
Well, we're delighted that we've taken one step further forward and that at least one site is specifically being looked at now. I do think it's unfortunate, however, that we have still not received any decision at all about funding for the Euro rail freight terminal. That's extremely important. We need a speedy decision, because otherwise Wales is going to be losing out to competition elsewhere.
Today's announcement is also linked to efforts to attract Britain's biggest ever foreign investment project to South Wales. It's understood a large site near the new terminal has been shortlisted by the Korean silicon chip company Lucky Gold Star. Tonight, a team from the WDA is in Seoul to persuade the Koreans the Cardiff site is now the best available.
An inquest in Cardiff has heard that a toddler took a lethal overdose of iron tablets after mistaking them for sweets. 2-year-old Sasha Derrick from Williamstown in the Rhondda found the pills hidden on a shelf. Her mother, Lisa, is calling for new guidelines on the sale of the supplements. The coroner recorded a verdict of accidental death. 3 people are still being questioned by police in North Wales after a man was stabbed to death at a flat in Penmaen Mawr. 32-year-old Graham Parry from Llanfairfechan was rushed to hospital last night but died shortly afterwards. An incident room has been set up in Colwyn Bay and police are appealing for witnesses. A bank executive from Wrexham has been jailed for 18 months at Chester Crown Court after admitting charges of theft, false accounting and forgery. Kevin Swire, who's 37, committed the offences between 1991 and 1993 when he worked as a personal services manager for Barclays in Wrexham. He stole more than £66,000 before the offences came to light. More than £1 million of lottery money has been awarded to projects in Wales today by the National Heritage Fund. Among those benefiting are several Church in Wales projects, but the handouts are causing a rift in the church. Some leaders, including the Archbishop of Wales, are still uncomfortable about accepting gambling money, while others feel they have little option.
When is a church bell not part of a church? The answer, when it's up for lottery funding. At least that's the line of thought the church is being pushed into as parishes like this at Cwmdu near Crickhowell turn to the National Lottery to raise cash.
And then we began to realise that we were raising hundreds of pounds and not thousands of pounds, and we were never going to reach our target. So when the lottery fund was announced, we thought that this was going to be our answer, and indeed it has been.
While the church can't condone gambling,